Hello and welcome back to yet another campaign diary, the 10th episode and a special episode. Now not special because it is the 10th episode, but because it's summer holiday. And most of the party, or the players, they were busy either with work or having their holiday outside of the country, so only 2 people could come. Now, I had to think of what to do. I could say, okay, the vast majority of the party is for some reason not capable of joining the exciting chase that was going to happen. But I know that would kind of suck, or I could try to roleplay the player characters who were going to perform the chase. But that would take the thunder away from those characters and the players as well. So I decided to do something else. I decided to write a short adventure that could be played through in a couple of hours. And that's why this is a special. It is still related to the overall plot, because the 2 players who showed up, well, I gave them character sheets that stated they were cultists. They were cultist explorers, so the enemy of the normal player characters, and they were off in the mountains trying to scout out the place from which they can eventually summon Undia to this world. And the 2 characters are the following. We have Urak the Fierce, the strongest warrior of the cult, and Kalarel the Touched. And Kalarel the Touched was quite interesting because she is the only person known to the cult who can directly communicate with Undia after performing a certain ritual. But that is really, really useful, as you might imagine, for a cult and for trying to find the right place where you can summon otherworldly beings, like Undia is. However, to make it even more interesting, I also gave each of them a sheet saying, okay, this is your character, this is a bit of their history, and these are the most recent thoughts your character has had. And on the sheet of Urak, I said, you have been starting to doubt Kalarel's integrity. Is she just doing this for her own goal? Does she really believe in Undia? Isn't she just doing this to make herself more powerful? And on Kalarel's sheet, I had written something along the lines of, you have been noticing that Urak has seemed less joyful or interested whenever you would relay messages from Undia to him, and you've been starting to doubt his devotion to the cause. So, yeah, I thought that would be cool. You know, this used to be quite a large group. Now there's only 2 left. And these 2 cultists have been starting to doubt one another. You know, they've been stuck in the mountains for months. So I figured this sort of mechanic would be realistic and very interesting. And the 2 players read their texts, and immediately they seemed to be suspicious of one another. So my plan had worked. But yes, after some quick scouting in session, they had found the entrance to a dungeon. And the dungeon was scattered with the strange eye markings, which the other player characters had also been seeing here and there. And whenever they saw those eye markings, they also found the sword fragments. So those are definitely related events. They managed to muscle their way through the dungeon just fine. It had some typical monsters, though I did come up with one monster which I put in there, which I sort of did some monkeying with. It was basically a zombie, not that interesting, but when the zombie dies, I described the flesh peeling off and a whole bunch of noxious, toxic fumes escaping the body, so anyone in melee range would take poison damage. And then all that was left of the zombie was a skeleton, so basically phase 2 of the enemy. But the skeleton would constantly produce toxic fumes, so you couldn't be in direct melee damage of the skeleton, or you had to roll to make sure that you don't receive poison damage. So that was a little interesting foe I threw in there. But after they managed to get through the entire dungeon, they were outside again, and they were inside a sort of valley with very steep mountains all around them, and a sort of plateau in the middle of the valley. And they reached the plateau via a bridge, and on the plateau it was just, you know, a stone floor, but a very large eye shape had been carved into the stone floor, and laid into the stone floor and around the eye symbol was a very large dark stone or metal ring. It was made of the same material they keep seeing here and there. It seems to also be related to the sword fragments and the eye symbol. So yeah, that's also what they found. And they found 5 obelisks standing around the eye, and in the middle of the eye symbol there was a sort of, well, ornate pedestal with a slot in the top. At that point, the 2 cultists, well, player characters at this point, didn't really know what to do, so I described, because they are so close to the point where worlds can intersect, I described Kalarel the Touched having a vision of a very bright figure, Undya, saying that they have reached their goal. And she commanded them, plural, to take the rings of Undya, put them on the pedestal, and through that she can bestow some of her power onto both of these cultists. However, Kalarel is the only person who heard this message. And only Kalarel walked up to the pedestal, didn't say anything to Uruk, placed the rings on the pedestal, and she basically turned into a vampire. Well, an Umpir, which is a sort of holy solar vampire, in my setting at least. And this is the gift of Undya, because Undya is a very, very powerful Umpir, which is a mythological creature in my lore, which exists, but not on the mortal plane up until this point. Kalarel is now the first Umpir in my setting in the mortal plane. Now you can imagine that Uruk, who was already a bit doubtful of Kalarel's motives, found this rather strange, and there was a discussion going back and forth saying, okay, I will stay here and guard whatever this place is. You go back to the cult and say that they have to come here and leave them here. And Uruk was like, no, why would I do that? Why should I do that? And they started expressing how they didn't trust one another. And they said, no, I still believe, but do you still believe? And they basically didn't believe one another anymore. And at certain intervals, I asked the now Umpir player, hey, could you make a wisdom saving throw? And he passed a few of them until he failed one. And then I described, overcome with rage and aggression and frustration over this fool not believing you and your growing bloodlust taking over, you can hear, you can almost feel the heartbeat of Uruk the Fierce. And because he had failed his wisdom save, I decided to take narrative control and say, you, Kalarel, the first Umpir, you can no longer control yourself, you lunge at Uruk and you drink his blood. And then I dramatically said, and this is where the story of these 2 cultists ends for now. And then I described how, after guarding this place for a few days, Kalarel tried to get in touch with Undya again, and Undya was most displeased because Kalarel didn't follow up a direct order from Undya, killed a fellow cultist, and Undya just felt really betrayed. So Undya then said, I will never contact you again. I will take my light away from you, because in the past these cultists have been able to use the light of Undya to their advantage, and I will make sure that any light burns you. And so yes, Undya had bestowed the gift of Umpirism onto Kalarel. Kalarel then betrayed Undya, or at least Undya says so, and Undya cursed Kalarel, making her, well, not only the first Umpir, but the first cursed Umpir, which would be a vampire, which we all know a creature to be very sensitive to sunlight. So that's how I sort of tied in the original Bram Stoker Dracula backstory into my campaign based on what the players decided. And that is what happened. That's where the adventure ended for the night. 2 players got to see some backstory, got to play some backstory of the cultists and get to play the bad guys, which is always very exciting. And afterwards I texted my other players with, hey, because of these 2 players, vampires now exist in the world, smiley face. And I had a lot of fun playing this and just seeing how these 2 characters interacted with one another when played by the players who normally play the good guys. But yeah, that's all I have to say about what happened in the previous adventure. If you have been, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.